So it looks very different to a normal battery that you might have in your phone or your iPad or whatever. It's got big tanks that sit separately, and then fluid is pumped around a kind of reaction chamber. It looks a lot more like a lab kit than a battery as you traditionally think about it.
Welcome to the Smarter E podcast special, a 6-part miniseries recorded live at the Smarter E Europe, which took place in June in Munich. Having visitors from all over the world flocking to Munich to visit the Intersolar, the EES, Power to Drive, and EM Power, we used the opportunity to sit down with some of them and dive deeper into some of the major current topics. Enjoy! The innovations in the field of energy storage and smart grids are enormous. The industry is booming, and there are currently numerous innovations appearing on the market. This was also shown by the submissions for the EES and the EM Power Award. Both awards honor innovative companies with their solutions. So what are the current trends we could marvel at, and where is the journey heading in the area of storage and smart grids? For the first episode of our mini-series, I sat down with 2 jury members of both awards here live at the Smarter E Europe exhibition. So let's jump right into the discussion with George Hilton and Pierre-Jean Alet. Welcome, George. Welcome, Pierre-Jean.
Pleasure to be here. Nice to meet you.
Hello, nice being here.
So let me just introduce you very quickly. George, of course, is a member of the EES award jury, and in his real professional life, he is a research manager for clean energy technologies at S&P Global, a world leader in critical information, analytics, and expertise for major industries and markets around the world. Pierre-Jean, on the other hand, represents the EM Power Award jury, and in his professional capacity, he is leading the Digital Energy Solutions Group at CSEM, a public-private, non-profit Swiss technology innovation center. So we'll first have a look at the EES award. That means I'll start with George. George, what role do energy storage systems play in a 24/7 energy supply with renewable energies? So basically the scenario we need if you want to go net zero.
It's a great question. It's one that's, I think, pretty central to the power system as we go forward and move to full renewable energy system, as you said. And so there's a very kind of clear and critical concept at the center of energy storage, and that's that we still need to be able to charge our phones, do our cooking, turn the lights on when it's not windy and when it's not sunny. Those are the 2 kind of key renewable energy resources that we'll use, are wind and sun. We have no control over when they're producing energy. So energy storage is the kind of key technology that can give us control over those the energy from those renewable resources and give us what is termed, like what's a critical term in the industry of flexibility in the energy industry. So if you fast forward to kind of 24/7 matching of renewable energies, this is a concept where all of our energy demands are met hour by hour by renewable energy. And clearly there are times throughout the night and times when it's not windy, when there's no availability for renewables. And those are the times that energy storage are going to be super, super useful going forwards. There's a lot in between here and there, but I think we're well on the trajectory towards that in some places.
Now, as we record this podcast, it's still the conference day at the Smarter E Europe. And I noticed that last year at the grand opening and also in the discussion, there was a lot of talk about the role of electric mobility and also, vehicle to grid technologies, etc. And I noticed this year there was actually a lot of talk about storage on all sorts of levels, even on a transmission level. And so storage really seems to be the talk of the town this year around. So I guess there must happen a lot of innovations. So what distinguishes the innovations of this year's EES award winners compared to last year?
Great question. So first, talking about the finalists. The finalists are just a small number of companies in what was a really large set of applicants for the award this year. As judges, we were really challenged to find the best amongst a good list of companies. And so I want to give a thank you to everyone who applied for the awards this year. But the 3 that we chose really stood out for different reasons. The first, Ellistor, they produce a hydrogen bromine flow battery. And we wanted to reward those because of the level of innovation that's gone into that. Flow batteries are very different to the technology that we see used today around lithium ion. And there are some kind of key potential advantages within this around the use of bromine, which is can be widely sourced from seawater, and also the potential synergies with hydrogen production as well that this flow battery offered.
Can you just repeat the full name of that battery again? Because there were several novel terms in it.
Yeah, so the company's Ellistor, they're producing a hydrogen bromine flow battery.
A hydrogen bromine flow battery. So that really seems to be something I need to research myself afterwards, because it really combines various interesting aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks very different to a normal battery that you might have in your phone or your iPad or whatever. It's got big tanks that sit separately, and then fluid is pumped around a kind of reaction chamber. It looks a lot more like a lab kit than a battery as you traditionally think about it.
Super interesting. Now, I think that leaves 2 more winners, if I counted correctly.
Yeah, so the second one is Fennekin. Fennekin have produced a really interesting product that combines 2 key innovations in one. First, it can reuse second life batteries. So you spoke a little bit about e-mobility and how that's growing very quickly. Actually, 95% of lithium-ion batteries will go into electric vehicles. And so there's a big idea for energy storage that we can reuse those batteries in the electricity grid. And that could be a much cheaper way of doing it. So they have produced a system that can use second life batteries. But importantly, and what impressed us as judges, is that it can also use first life batteries. And this was news to me that actually there are a lot, it was news to me, but it makes sense that actually there are a lot of batteries that don't quite pass the quality assurance needed to go into a vehicle, or are slightly out of spec, or aren't used in a vehicle for any number of reasons. And this battery can take those, integrate them into a system, and then they are reused for energy storage whilst they're still new, instead of being scrapped or recycled. We thought that was a great innovation in combining those 2 things together.
So that's really good benefit in terms of sustainability and saving resources. 1 more winner to go.
Yes, and the last one, this one's a little bit more standard and in line with what we're seeing in the industry, but we felt it was important to recognize just how far and mature the energy storage industry has come. And this one goes to Sungrow Power Supply, and we're rewarding their liquid-cooled energy storage system. There are a couple of, so this is very similar to all the batteries that are going to be installed globally, in fact, but there are a couple of key advantages that we saw with this system. First is that they could cut installation times, and that's installation development is taking far too long across the industry, and shortening that is going to be really important going forwards, and so we really like that. And then secondly, they claim to have a much lower difference in temperature across the hottest cell in the system to the coldest cell in the system. That's really important for the whole system as one, to degrade in a uniform way, and is really important for the longevity of that system. So they've achieved that through some clever liquid cooling in a new and innovative way. So with those 2 things combined, we wanted to give them the award for that.
Wonderful, thank you. So those were this year's award winners of the EES Award. Talking about the industry generally, do you see other topics that are dominating the industry or trends that we should be aware of?
There's a lot of trends going on in the energy storage industry. The industry has kind of grown from scratch all the way up to something that's quite large as we stand today, and will be much, much larger by the end of 2030. So I could pick from a wide range of things. The pieces that I will choose are around bankability. I think that there's a lot of talk around the issue of bankability for energy storage, and how investors need to become more comfortable with the technology. That has the investors need to become more comfortable with it in order to drive money coming into the space and new installations going forwards. That has come a long way, and we've seen huge regulatory change that has helped that, but there's still further to go. So I would keep an eye on the term bankability and what that means for the energy storage industry across Europe. And then the second, and this links to some of the winners that we had, is around technology. We have a kind of interplay between the existing technology of lithium ion, which lots of people look at and go, that's great for short duration applications, but we might need something different for longer duration applications. And so, for instance, that was the winner. Sungrow was a lithium-ion battery. And then we have alternatives to that, the zinc, the bromine, hydrogen flow battery. And as we're moving forward in the industry, we need to look at all these new technologies and how they're coming through and see if they can find a space and find a niche in order to grow. Because they have a lot of challenges in beating the incumbent in lithium-ion. So that's another trend to look out for.
And if we maybe look at the next 5 years, imagine yourself the EES award 5 years from now. What developments can be expected until then? Just a short statement.
It's a good question. I think the next 5 years are going to be all about scale and scale in manufacturing. And so hopefully we'll have some products that are much more modular and can be rolled out very, very quickly at huge scale for the industry and at much lower cost. That's what I'll be looking to see.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, George. And I'm really keen already to Google that chromium hydrogen battery, because it's something that maybe we even get to invite to the podcast itself, because that sounds really something that you can't explain in just 5 minutes. So I'll spare you that work, but I'll Google it myself, and hopefully we can maybe even invite the winners into the podcast themselves. But let's move on to the EM Power Award, because obviously that's been quite interesting as well. And actually, it's been launched for the first time this year around. So Pierre-Jean, how did that come about?
Yeah, indeed. It's the new kid on the block. And in a sense, it reflects the evolution of, well, the event, the Smart E event, and the industry as a whole. So EM Power is the youngest part of the exhibition and the conference. And now we are at a stage where there is enough industry traction, there is enough exhibitors, good exhibitors, enough support from the industry also in the conference, that we have a community attraction and good applicants for that award. So it was a good time for the Smarter E to create that award. More generally, I think it reflects the evolution of the industry and the energy system. Because what it means is that all the awards that we've had so far were focused on one individual piece of the system. The photovoltaics is the oldest one, then we had the energy storage, the car charging, and now we are really looking at bringing all of that together and building an energy system that has these new components at heart.
Now, that makes perfectly sense and also captures sort of the spirit of the Smarter E as such. What kind of significance do you think might the award have for the energy sector?
I think that really reflects this moment we are in time. So when you look at the history, we've had these sort of newcomers trying to push and challenge the energy system a bit from the outside. And then you had the incumbents, the grid operators, the big utilities looking, they fought a bit, then they saw the problem. And now is the moment when, in a sense, that battle is over and everybody agrees that the future is based on wind, some renewables, storage, and we need to redesign and we need to go fast in transforming the energy system.
Now, the smart grid and generally the whole transformation covers quite a wide range of topics. So I guess for you, maybe it might be a little bit more tasking to actually define trends or to single out trends. But did you see some in the solutions that were submitted to the award?
Yes, so I can mention a few. One is this idea of convergence. So a lot of the applicants actually come from one of these very specific angles that I mentioned. So we had applicants coming from batteries, coming from PV, coming from the house. And there is this convergence around building an energy system that works for all. Another trend that is related to that is the importance of interfaces. I would say most of the finalists were dealing with the issue of interfaces in one way or another. So that's how you get these different devices talking to each other, to synchronize, to avoid that everybody charges their batteries at the same time, for example, or their cars. And this coordination is actually very challenging from a practical perspective, because you need to build common understanding between these machines. You need to build the safety that goes with all this communication. And that's really a challenge that all our finalists pretty much address. And the last trend I would like to mention is this notion of speed and agility. And I think that's very significant for the power system and the smart grids, which is a slow-moving industry for good reasons. Grid infrastructure is there for 50, 70 years. So you need to think twice normally before doing something. And of course, that's out of sync with the pace of deployments of PV, of electric vehicles. And in several of our finalists, we've seen examples of solutions that sort of make do and help to find temporary solutions, to experiment, to learn and get going, rather than wait for the perfect ground design.
Now, you mentioned 3 trends, but there's only 2 winners. Were some of these 3 trends represented in the winners themselves?
Of course they are, and several of them combined. I can mention for the last point, this issue of speed is very well illustrated by one of our winners, which is also Fennecan, by the way, with a rental system that they propose. So instead of expecting people, and especially companies, to buy large storage systems, what Fennecan has developed is a service whereby you can rent for periods of time ranging from 1 month to 100 months some storage systems, which Fennecan will manage for you. And what it allows is really a huge flexibility and speed again, because, for example, that's a way to bridge the gap between the installation of a large PV plant and the upgrade of the grid. Instead of waiting 18 months for the grid to come, you can just put this battery for 18 months and then you have your additional grid connection. So that's a lot of PV energy produced in the meantime. And also for many companies in the C&I segment in particular, it's quite difficult to know what amount of battery would make sense for them. And so instead of hiring consultants doing tons of engineering studies, they can just rent a battery for some time, see how they use it, and then either extend the rental or buy something that is actually suited to their needs.
That's really interesting, because just, as we record this podcast, I obviously was also at the conference and I talked to one of the largest online retailers there is. People can imagine the name. He was sharing information that all of their warehouses basically have solar on top of their roof now, but they're not connected to the grid yet. So that might sound like a solution perfectly for them to transition their time and stop them from having to curtail the energy produced. Really interesting. And yeah, Fennecan seems to be a company one should have an eye on, since they scored twice in the awards this year. Now, that seems to be quite an innovative company, which brings me to the question, which areas of the smart grid do we still need more innovation in? Like, what would you like to see in the future?
It's a broad question. I think these issues that are reflected in this year's finalists are here to stay for a while. So especially the question of interfaces is still a blocking point to many of the concepts that are around. If you want to deploy flexibility on the demand side, for example, you need to be able to talk to many different devices in a smooth way. So that, I expect, in the next few years will make further progress. One thing that I think will develop and hasn't been so much reflected in the finalists this year is really the digitalization aspects, going deep into that so that we can have really much more confidence about what is happening in the energy system on different timescales, so that it becomes easier to plan for the infrastructure, easier to know how much energy will be at different times and different locations. And that's really a big challenge with this evolution towards a very distributed energy system. And I think with the components that are being installed, and if we put the right tools, the right data science tools, the right cybersecurity tools in place, we have really the potential to gain insights and to gain very granular control over all these elements. But getting there and getting the confidence that it works, that it's reliable, is a big challenge. And I think that will keep quite a few of us busy over the next few years.
And now, since I have the pleasure of having both of you here, George and Pierre-Jean, maybe when tackling that challenge, George, what do you think can the electric energy storage area contribute in that area? Or like, where do you see overlaps to what you heard Pierre-Jean talking about?
I think there were a lot of overlaps. I was just listening to you talking there, and the one, I can't remember the specific term you used, but about different concepts kind of coming together from PV, wind, energy storage. That concept of technologies being used together in a holistic way is one that I think is really important to energy storage going forwards. I think we need to see more companies doing that and looking at the whole picture. So, for instance, you could go to the large online retailer you spoke about. I would like to see companies like that being offered a full energy package. We will take care of all your energy needs. And it doesn't matter to you where it comes from, how much it costs, hour by hour, it will all be wrapped up into one package. And it will be green, crucially. Because if you do that, you're then producing a system that will bring in storage, it will create an opportunity for that. And it's one that will also help to decarbonize industry going forward. So that kind of concept of bringing together all the different technologies, I think, is one that can be shared between the different awards this year.
And if I just take that as a takeaway, if out there a company is around that wants to win next year around in the EES award jury, you might want to come in with a holistic offering. As we heard, the jury is looking for that. Now, Pierre-Jean, from your end, what would you sort of like wish the other sectors, for example, storage, would pitch in for it all to take off and come together? Like if you had one or two wishes to your colleagues from the other areas.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that we can pretty much take for granted is the technical capabilities of batteries and energy storage systems. They are crucial to the system, and especially to manage the dynamics. So from a grid perspective, we very much rely on these technologies to help balance and stabilize things. Where I have expectations to improve is very much on this issue of data sharing and openness of interfaces. So it is still very difficult when you want to manage a distribution network to know exactly what is being installed, what is the state of health of the different devices that are operating on your grid. And you may have also some competing use cases. So some batteries being used to do arbitrage on the electricity market, which is great from a system perspective, but maybe very detrimental for the local grid. And for that, and if we want to find a solution, we really need to have this data flowing between the actors in a controlled, secure, and reasonably open way.
Wonderful. So really using digitalization for more transparency and coordination in the grid. Thanks a lot, George, and thanks a lot, Pierre-Jean, for giving us an insight in, on the one hand, the EES award winners this year in 2023, and on the other hand, the EM Power Award winners. If you want to learn more about the awards, you'll find more information about the finalists and also, of course, of the winners of the EES and the EM Power Awards online on our website at thesmartere-award.com. This was part 1 of our 6-piece mini-series. In the second episode, I will sit down with Sepp Henbest, former chief economist at Bloomberg NEF and now head of climate transition at HSBC. He will talk with me about the biggest global trends that are relevant for the energy world at the moment, and of course in his current capacity he will also dive with me specifically into the role of banking and finance in bringing the world closer to its net zero target and financing renewables.